Thank you all for joining us in person and online this very rainy morning here in Arlington. I don't know if those on Zoom have heard, but we're also under tornado warning. So things are exciting here, and you're probably very glad that you are tucked in wherever you are in the world. But thank you all for joining us, no matter what format you are here. So I'm going to present a work in progress. This is an idea that I've just begun playing with, so I'm really looking forward to discussion to push this idea further. And you are welcome to get in touch with me if you don't have a chance to ask a question or engage during our time today. I sort of pay attention to Twitter. If you contact me through Twitter, I will see it, but I don't really use it anymore for obvious reasons. But you're welcome to get in touch with me in other venues. So while data is often understood in computational terms as information encoded and organized for interpretation with digital tools and algorithms, the term has a long history dating back to at least the 17th century. In its earliest uses, data is defined as a given and a basis for decision-making and thus power. A study of colonial knowledge systems offers numerous examples of the link between power and data regimes, revealing the integral role of data in the building and maintenance of empires. This paper takes up several methodological questions. How do we handle colonial data, both data generated by colonial administrators and data we recreate from fragmentary sources to address the absences in the historical record born from conquest? How does a collections as data approach situate colonial archives themselves as data to be analyzed? And how do we ensure that our own research does not replicate the extractive colonial data practices of empire? So in my own case study, I examine Ottoman Algeria. So during the 1830 French conquest of Algeria, witnesses watched aghast as officers looted administrative buildings and soldiers used official Ottoman documents to light their pipes. In the following years, the plunder continued until most of the official records from Algiers and neighboring cities were either lost, stolen, or destroyed. The case of Algeria, a palimpsest of overlapping Berber, Roman, Arab, Ottoman, and French legacies, highlights the problematic nature of colonial and colonized archives and the question of what decolonizing data means in such a complex context. A few extant fragments of knowledge from Algeria's Regency period emerge from French and Algerian chronicles of the governors, travel narratives, diplomatic correspondence, a few surviving Ottoman registers, and commercial records from the French floral concessions. Through close reading and structured notes and developing a custom context-specific classification schema, I reconstructed data sets on the governors of Ottoman Algeria between 1518 and 1837. This reconstruction does not simply reconstitute imperial ontologies, but rather seeks to describe these men and women in the social network data set I created with categories that they themselves would have likely employed. Historical data set reconstruction and construction is one way we can begin to address the voids in the archive. Similarly, through text mining to identify both named and unnamed entities and social network analysis to illustrate and study their relationships, unnamed women's spectral presence may be recovered and represented despite their absence in the archival record. Hand in hand, these techniques allow us to reassemble data lost in the violence of colonial conquest and to resurrect stories, if not the voices, of the men and women long silenced. In this way, we subvert colonial weapons of quantification and convert them into tools for restitution. So this is how I define restorative data justice, a theoretical framework. Apologies, I forgot to put the slide up of the quote, but I will share this after the talk so you have the slides. So this is how I define restorative data justice, and a theoretical framework I propose for our consideration today. I present this concept as a response to both common scholarly challenges we face when undertaking studies of marginalized populations, especially using colonial archives. And it is a response to this present moment, this era of capitalistic datafication education, and increasingly urgent calls for social change and justice. I argue that this concept of restorative data justice may serve as a bridge between academic studies and work in current data cultures. It offers one way to redress the problematic nature of colonial knowledge production and its legacy in information structures and systems still at work today in the present age of capitalistic surveillance and widespread data misuse. Restorative data justice is not simply a concept, but as suggested above, it is also a process. And we can see here I'm bringing together multiple ideas from critical data studies, from information studies, to wrap my mind around what we might mean and what kind of work this concept could do for us. So it stems from this notion of data justice. Data can be used to challenge dominant understandings of the world, to create or recreate conditions for counter-imaginaries and advance social justice claims. In this idea of data justice, it is seen as a concept, as a framework, as an approach, and as a practice. So I bring these ideas together as I extend this into the notion of restorative data justice. So as a process, it involves 3 steps. Thinking of and working with our sources as data, or generating data from them, specifically on or about people who have been marginalized, either in the past or the present, or both. Structuring the ontology of that data based on their own epistemologies, or as close as we can come, and not those of the colonizing or otherwise oppressive forces. And number 3, conducting analyses of that data in ethically and historically responsible ways that highlight the experiences and roles, if not the voices, of those who have been marginalized, restoring them to their historical context, and restoring information about their lives to a general, if not a specific, archive of knowledge, not, as the colonial archive once did, to control and dominate, but rather to resist imperial narratives of the past. In the historical context, this means returning actors to the narrative through data gathering and analysis. I use my own work on recreating Ottoman Algerian registers as a case study for this process, but it's not the only one. There are many approaches to this. In identifying the governors for my own work, specific details of their lives and their families through prosopography and social network analysis, I seek to bring their actions, experiences, even their very existence to light, to literally restore people to the historical record, recreating a record that has since been lost or destroyed, and outlining the limits of what is or can be known about this specific past. Through this work, we notice the spectral presence of those long since dead, as well as the shadow of records of their lives that may have once existed, and those that only ever existed in our imaginary archive. Sorry, I have to get down to the next section. So I have 2 methods that I'm using in my own work. These, again, are not the only methods for this work, but I present them here as examples of what I am talking about as I describe this concept of restorative data justice. So the first is prosopography, or collective biography, putting together and recreating an Ottoman register that no longer exists for the governors of, right now I'm focusing on 2 provinces, the central in Algiers and the one in Constantine, Algeria, the eastern province. So I've done this using the partial information in the sources that I mentioned, and I am trying to develop some new methods when our sources are incredibly fragmentary, as is the case for my own study. I do have some questions around this in terms of the affordances, the limitations, and being sensitive to the problematic nature of quantifying people's lives, because this has been used in the past to control and oppress people, but also because it brings an apparent objectivity to the past and to this data in ways that can be problematic, and we need to nuance as we write about it. All right, I am running out of time, so I'll briefly show you here are the just snippets of the data. It doesn't include all the variables that I coded and classified and created an ontology for. And I would be happy to talk about the problematic nature of identifying ethnicity in this time period and with this group of people. And I also use social network analysis. The important piece here was I not only extracted named entities, which we can do computationally, but I also extracted unnamed entities and their relationships when they were mentioned in the text. And I went one step further. If I could identify a father and son, I knew a woman had to be involved in that process somewhere. So I added her into the data set as well and developed a social network that I could analyze computationally, as well as dive into the details and the nuance of these family networks. So more details are available in my book that just came out, Visualizing History's Fragments. So that is available, and I welcome comments, questions, and would love to discuss these ideas further. Thank you.